Let's look at how our old friend, the Northern Territory News, has chosen to hold to account, to use one of the company's favourite phrases, the new country Liberal government in Darwin. As part of last December's mini-budget, the Territory Minister for Indigenous Advancement, Alison Anderson, issued a media release.
Eligible houses in Territory homelands and outstations will benefit from $5,200 in works under funding announced in today's mini-budget.
Note that it says eligible houses in homelands and outstations, not every householder in Aboriginal communities. Yet this is how the announcement was reported next day by the NT News.
Every Aboriginal householder living in communities is to get $5,200 to do up their homes.
2 days later, the News' Nigel Adlam repeated the claim.
The government is giving bush residents $5,200 each to do up their homes.
Adlam described the program as a Christmas present to bush residents, and an editorial on the same day went further.
Chief Minister Terry Mills is adding to the cargo cult mentality by handing out thousands of dollars. The money is a blatant election bribe.
That afternoon, Alison Anderson issued a second media release.
Bush residents are not being given a $5,200 Christmas present, and to suggest that they are is both inaccurate and inflammatory. The $5,200 will be provided to outstation service providers to be spent on necessary repairs and maintenance.
In other words, no cash handouts to anyone. The money will go to the tradies doing the repairs or to their employers, not to the people living in the houses. But this was how Nigel Adlam reported it next day.
Alison Anderson yesterday defended the Territory Government's decision to give people living in Indigenous communities and outstations $5,200 each to do up their houses.
Still sounds like a handout to me. It was only well down in the story that Adlam reported,
For the first time, Ms Anderson said the money would go to outstation service providers.
In 2 editorials over Christmas, the paper returned to its theme.
People in the bush are being favoured in an outrageous way. The government is giving them a $5,200 Christmas present. Mr Mills gave bush residents a $5,200 Christmas present, a blatant election bribe. Ordinary Territorians are being treated with utter contempt.
On the 29th of December, Nigel Adlam was back in the fray with a classic, amazing rumour denied.
Big cheques, not gifts. The Territory Government yesterday denied handing out money in the street to Indigenous people in a remote community.
But Adlam reported that a public servant
said an informant in Nookar in Arnhem Land had witnessed 2 people wearing
CLP-branded clothes,
standing under a CLP banner and handing out the cheques on December 21st.
The recipients of the cheques were taking them straight to the local store and cashing them, many buying large-size flat-screen TVs.
A third-hand fable. The public servant was convinced that the cheques were part of the government's $5,200 housing handout. The NT News printed no evidence whatsoever for that belief. Yet despite the government's denial, it still ran the story. MediaWatch called the store manager at Nookar last week. He told us that
the money that was distributed in Nookar was store profits. I don't know how they got the other story.
And the country Liberals have told MediaWatch that they
categorically deny that anyone from the organisation was involved in handing out money from the country Liberals or the Northern Territory Government at Nookar.
After several more stories in the same vein, Alison Anderson lost patience. The government paid for a near full-page ad in the NT News. Stories about Christmas gifts, she wrote, were
absolute nonsense. No individual will receive so much as 1 cent under this program.
And it ended,
I recall an old saying in journalism, never let the facts spoil a good story.
In late January, the News did give Alison Anderson 3 pages to explain her programme, but no apology for its intemperate editorials and no correction of its misleading stories. In a long response to our questions, NT News' editor Matt Cunningham makes this point several times.
The NT News has published the denials by the government with prominence. Its news reports on this issue have been balanced.
But Matt, reporting easily disprovable and inflammatory nonsense isn't okay just because you run a denial at the head of it. It's still inflammatory nonsense.